All right, welcome back, everyone. This is David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos, and I am joined by a very special guest, Michael Witcoff, also known as Brother Augustine. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for coming on. I was reaching out to you. You were kind enough to offer me a conversation over on your channel. And then I reached out to you, given your background in occultism and Freemasonry, to start talking about that over here. Yet we didn't really get into occultism or esoteric traditions in our previous conversation.
Mostly about mushrooms and bodybuilding. The last one.
Yeah, that basically sums up the whole thing. Talking about psychedelic experiences and then weightlifting. But for those of you who don't know, Brother Augustine and I and Michael Cisco and E. Michael Jones and Luke Kindrat, we are all going to be at the Trad Forum in June in Indiana. What do you remember the exact date of that?
It's either the 9th or the 12th, but I would have to check my reservations and stuff.
Yeah. So Michael Cisco is going to be on this Friday to try to promote that. So if you guys are interested, if you would like to meet Brother Augustine, E. Michael Jones, Luke, Michael, Cisco, or myself, definitely reach out to Michael Cisco and get some tickets for that event. It's going to be a lot of fun for sure. So for those of you who aren't familiar, I imagine everybody who's watching is already a subscriber to your channel. So. But I did want you to kind of introduce kind of what you do and your relationship to Freemasonry, your book. Can you explain a little bit about your book? I think that's how most people, that was my entry point into who you were, was somebody discussing your book, and then I looked into it, then I looked you up, and then I saw your conversation with Dyer, and that was kind of how I got into your content.
Sure. Yeah, my first introduction to the Orthodox public sphere was in 2018 at the end of the year when Jay Dyer and his then fiance Jamie were out here locally at a nearby church, and obviously he was interested in the occult and Masonry, and someone had told him about me, and someone had told me about him, and so we got together. I went up to his Airbnb, very nice place they had rented, and we sat down, and actually the first half hour of our chat was great, and then Jay realized that he didn't turn the microphone on, so what you guys all heard was the second version of our conversation. But what we were talking about was this book on the Masons and their lies, which is the book I wrote after leaving Freemasonry. This is actually the third version technically, because the first version I wrote when I became a Protestant, and I was still going to the lodge at the time. So I joined Freemasonry in 2015. I became a Master Mason, which is the third degree by the end of that year, and then quickly joined other groups like the Scottish Rite and the York Rite, but you have to be a third degree Master Mason to join. And from every branch has more branches, so to speak. So I was very deeply involved. I was an officer in 4 different bodies, spent a ton of time and energy doing Masonic stuff and extra learning and things of that nature, and giving lectures on Hermeticism and Baphomet and various things like that to different subgroups that I was in. And then when I became a Protestant and started studying the scripture and praying more and talking to people, like when I first went to my Protestant church, I would go sometimes after a Masonic meeting. So I would go in my suit with my Masonic ring still on, and people would give me flack about it, say that's evil. And I was like, you don't know what you're talking about, you know. But the more I understood both systems, Christianity and Masonry, even though from a Protestant perspective at the time, the more I realized they were completely incompatible. And so it was a very slow and difficult process to leave. But once I did, I decided to write this book to keep other people or to help Christians who might not understand what they're involved in, to get them out of the lodge and back into church. Then I rewrote it as an Orthodox Christian and published it. At that point, a priest in New York from the Antiochian Archdiocese, an Orthodox priest, read it and I think he either emailed me or he said this in the review on Amazon, that it would make sense to rewrite it again as a kind of handbook for priests, because he said that at one point in his parish, in his ministry, every single adult male was a Freemason in his Orthodox parish. Yeah. So I thought, well, that's the bad situation. Why do people not know what this is? In the older, a couple hundred years ago, everyone understood. But the Orthodox, most archdioceses have not put out a statement about Masonry, even though some have. So I rewrote it again, and basically what it does is it compares stuff Masonry says with stuff the church fathers said, compares the Masonic quote unquote sacraments, like your demonic baptism, which is your third degree Master Mason ritual, where it's a death and resurrection ritual, as many of the mystery schools were in the pagan world. There's in the 14th degree, there's bread and wine involved. In the Knights Templar degree, you drink wine out of a skull. Like, they have their own little sacraments. So comparing those with the ones that the Orthodox Church offers, and just really trying to explain to people, you cannot be part of both of these because they are opposites. Even though Masonry doesn't present itself as anti-Christian, the more you understand it, the more obvious it is that you really can't be both. You have to choose.
So I didn't realize how long you've been Orthodox. That was something that we were talking about privately. Can you give a timeline on this whole process of you in the occult, in Freemasonry? When did you start becoming aware of Orthodoxy? How long did the transition of lifestyle to Orthodoxy actually take for you?
So as a caveat, I have no sense of time or the passage of time, and I'm often wrong about when things happened in my own, even in my recent past. So I didn't realize that I had joined Masonry in 2015 until I kept some of the stuff that I had to just like show people that I was a Mason, because I sometimes get accused of lying about making up my whole experience there. So I was looking through this stuff to make a video about it so I can throw all that stuff away. And I was like, oh, I became Mason 2015. I thought it was like 2016, 2017. But I had been in like a new age kind of person before I joined Masonry, curious about spirits and channeling and Kundalini and all that beforehand, probably starting in about 2014. And I lived in Hawaii in a little new age hippie commune before I moved back to the mainland.
How long were you there?
5 months.
So 5 months you're in Hawaii in a new age commune?
Yeah.
With people that you knew or did not know beforehand?
I mean, no, I didn't know anyone when I got there.
How did you find out about the commune, or did you go to Hawaii and then you discovered the commune?
So when I lived in North Carolina, I had a girlfriend there at the time who may or may not be watching this, even though she's married with a kid now, an ex-girlfriend who our relationship was dramatic. Let me put it that way. We were both troubled souls and doing our best. And sometimes your best is not very good, but that's all you can do.
Right.
And so that situation was getting very stressful. And then someone almost stabbed me at work. I was working in the psych ward at the time, a locked-in psych ward, where my job was to restrain the people when they got violent. And we were not allowed to use chemical or mechanical restraints. So every restraint had to be taking someone to the ground and holding them there until they stopped screaming. So already not a very fun job, But sometimes they would sneak in contraband. And this one kid, he snuck in a comb with this big spike on the end, and he like lunged at me with it. And so I threw him into a wall, and, he was a very small kid, just kind of crazy. Threw him into a wall, and I like broke the comb and threw it away. And then my boss called me in to debrief the incident, and he said, well, what happened to the item? So I threw it out. And he said, oh, we can't throw away the client's personal items. It's like, are you kidding? He just tried to stab me with this. He said, yeah, I know, but it's his property. So I said,
what?
Geez. Yeah. So we had that bad job situation, the girlfriend drama. And so I decided I needed to just take a break from everything.
Mm-hmm.
I decided I needed some good vibes in life. So I just Googled the word sabbatical, and I found this place on the big island of Hawaii, which was a clothing optional kind of new age jungle commune. It was a yoga training facility, and they had aquaponics farm there, like growing all the food. It was all organic, actually extremely healthy diet, to be honest. Not that the substances we were doing were healthy, but the food at least was healthy, and the exercise was good, even though it was yoga, so it was demonic, but stretching is always good for you. And they had a gym too, which was nice. So I just Googled sabbatical. I found this place that looked like exactly what I needed. I was like, oh, this looks like this aloha spirit, and everyone's like living together in harmony. And that sounded much better than what my life had turned into in North Carolina. So I basically just pieced out, and I just went out there and quit my life. I went out for 1 month. And then I liked it so much, I like re-upped for 4 more. And so out there, everyone was into crystals and yoga and divine Shakti, Shiva energy, all that stuff, drawing pictures of the Ganesh elephant, Ganesha, whatever its name is. And
Ganesha.
I was like I wasn't necessarily into that stuff, but I was surrounded by it constantly. Mm-hmm. And I believed in what in retrospect was some form of Gnosticism, of like self-knowledge and all this and whatnot. And then when I got back to the mainland, I worked at Greenpeace as a canvasser, raising money for good causes, or what claimed to be good causes, and things like that. And every day on the way to work, I would drive by the Scottish Rite Lodge, the local one, this big building right in the middle of the freeway, the Masonic Lodge. And then one day, I was just oh no, I forgot a part of that story. So I'd always see this building, didn't really know what it was, and then I was canvassing, going door to door. And one of the people I canvassed had the square and compass on his on his door frame. I said, I keep seeing this symbol everywhere. What is this? He said, oh, it's Freemasonry. I said, well, what's Freemasonry? He said, it's the world's oldest and largest fraternity. And I said, okay, but like, what do you guys do there? And he said, well, we have rituals and secrets and things. And so I was just immediately interested. Like, oh, he's not telling me what it is. There must be something interesting there.
Well, your Gnostic presupposition of gnosis was intrigued. Right, esoteric knowledge.
Very much so. I was like, oh, there's some mystery that I don't know. I want to have more wisdom. And so one day, me and a girl that I've been canvassing with, we went to that big lodge after work in our Greenpeace shirts, stood out a little bit compared to all the guys in their business suits and whatnot. And I just started asking, what is this? And one of the first things this older gentleman said was, well, she can't join because she's a woman. And she was like this hyper feminist. So she was so mad, but she wasn't saying anything, doing an angry silence. And I said, okay, so how does it all work? And he said, well, the third degree is the highest. And I said, well, I heard about the 33rd. And he said, well, the 3rd degree is higher than the 33rd degree. And this puzzle, I got consumed by it. I was like, I have to understand what this means. So I applied to join in 2015, and I joined and kind of quickly moved through the 1st and 2nd degrees, where you have to do, I forgot what it's called. It's like testing your competence. It's just like a memorization test, basically, of what happens in the ritual. So when you get your 1st degree, and then when you can memorize and repeat back exactly what happens according to this coded script, then you can move to the next degree. So I was very interested. Like, I just wanted more and more and more and more of it. So every extra group I was interested in. I didn't join the Shriners because it has a lot of Arabic symbolism, and this was like at the time when terrorism was big, and I was just kind of repulsed by anything that looked Muslim or anything like that. But I joined the Scottish Rite, and I helped prompt for the degrees, they're like little plays, basically. So if an actor forgets his lines, you can like remind him through the earpiece in his ear, hey, here's what you're supposed to say at this part.
I didn't. So they wear earpieces during ritual?
So for the Knights not the Knights Templar, it's the 18th degree, Knight of the Rose Cross in the Scottish Rite, at least the way our building was situated. The actors were very far from where we were sitting. So like in smaller rooms, I could just shout out the line, which is kind of like disruptive to the ritual, of course. But in that giant auditorium, I had a microphone, they had an earpiece, and some of the speeches are very long. Like, it's hard to memorize these long lectures that you do in the degrees. So yeah, but the cool thing about that for me at the time was I got to see the entire degree like on paper, which most of the guys never actually get to see. In fact, when you're experiencing a degree, you don't really get what's happening around you because you're blindfolded for most of it. You don't get it till you go back and watch someone else go through the same thing. So I was very deeply embedded in it, basically, and just wanted more and more and more.
So, okay, you're getting into the Freemasonry. You're getting into the Scottish Rite. You're moving up. You're seeing the symbolism. Yeah. While you're in Freemasonry, were you also practicing magic? Because one of the things that I've talked about was I got into sigil magic. So I wasn't into conjuration or chaos magic or all these different types, sex magic. I was interested. I watched Grant Morrison, the comic book writer, and him talking about writing down your intentions. So for those people listening who aren't familiar, you can one way you can perform sigil magic is you say, well, my highest desire is to have an extra $2,000 at the end of the month. And so you write that down in a sentence, and then you go through and you mark out all the vowels, because vowels are phonetic. They contain no meaning. So now you have all these consonants. Now you mark out the consonants that repeat. Now you have somewhere between 12 and 20 consonants. And you create a symbol with those consonants. Now what you've done is mimicked God. You've spoke creation. You've took a ethereal, non-physical thing. You've made it two-dimensional. You wrote down the intention. You've materialized your intention. Now you put that into a symbol, and then you can charge it. You can get other people to look at it. You can kind of implant it in your own subconscious, or, which is also recommended, is people masturbate, and when you hit the state of orgasm, you stare at the symbol, because the corpus callosum fuses the hemispheres at the point of orgasm. This is a unique feature about the human anatomy and brain, and so interestingly, occultists have used that, and they try to implant sigils and symbols inside their subconscious during that orgasmic state. So I was very familiar with the theories of magic, but me practicing magic, the only ones that I participate in is I did do sigil magic multiple times for myself and saw that this was real. And that's, and it took a minute, but once I saw it was real, that started to really bring up more questions. And then I went to a Gnostic mass when I moved to Berkeley. One of the other PhD students, she was a Thelemite. Another PhD graduate who was a professor at the school, he was also a Thelemite. And so I went to their Gnostic mass, and that was probably the last magical anything that I attended. It just didn't feel, it didn't sit right afterwards. And it was, interestingly, it was like that was part of this cascade that eventually brought me to orthodoxy. So my question for you then, with all that said, you're in Freemasonry. Before you even get to orthodoxy, are you practicing magic on yourself? What type of magic, and what are you doing?
So I was just kind of curious about everything. So I looked at the I forgot the guy's name, the creation of servitors, where you create your own little slave spirits.
Right.
I was imbuing crystals with things. I was doing Kabbalah, like practical Kabbalah, if you want to call it that. Like a specific trait I wanted, I would find the right Sephiroth for that, and then create a ritual using the correct colors and the correct shape, a shape with the right number of sides that corresponded to the right Sephiroth. And I did do sigil magic as well. I had a book by Austin Osman Spare kind of explaining exactly what you just explained about the point of orgasm, and the theory behind that is that your mind is open in that instant, connecting your conscious with like the great unconscious, like so you're programming the world through your own brain kind of, and all that kind of crazy stuff. So I was doing all of that, but I didn't learn that stuff in Masonry. So there are people in Masonry that are very into that stuff. But my experience there was they don't tell you that until they notice you already talking about it. They're very quiet, and everything is very, very compartmentalized in Masonry. So they're not going to talk about Baphomet and Hermeticism. They do mention Kabbalah in the 4th degree, but most guys have no idea what they're saying. It just goes in one ear and out the other. They don't pay attention. In the 4th degree, they teach you this is all based on Kabbalah, but most guys never care or look any further into it. But if you hear that, and then you start studying it on your own, and then you're talking with your Mason friends, and you're talking about like the actual technical details of Kabbalah, then the guys who are into it will say, hey, come check out this other little subgroup. We think you'd like this. So there's spies everywhere from these other groups waiting for you to go first, like waiting for you to demonstrate your interest. They're not going to come say, hey, get into magic.
Right.
They're very quiet about it.
It's extremely self-selecting.
Yeah. And they're very, like, you would never know who's into what, because everyone is very similar very polite, very respectful. Like there's this kind of like the Anton LaVey Church of Satan stuff makes you think that Satanists are these like goofy LARPers in costumes with pig
Right.
head masks. And there are some, but the ones that are, I would say, a lot smarter than that, you would never have any idea.
Right.
They're just very nice, level, emotionally, like almost like a flat affect emotionally.
Right, and they're and the way that they
Guys,
physically appear, they're not going to have implanted devil horns on their forehead.
no, they're
Like
not.
they're not going to make a mockery of it. It's going to
Yeah,
be again, it's going to be so seductive, the individual, just like Satan himself. Like you're not going to realize it. They're going to be very clever. Often, and that's the thing is when you get into this occult stuff, and you can speak to this. It's I think again it's tangential to my mind of sort of the evil genius is that when you get into this occult stuff and magic, it is heady. These people do
yeah,
read, you know, they're literate, you know, and
yeah.
so it's like this. You're getting into a sort of community of intelligentsia, but yeah. So speak to that because you get into these realms and people are smart. They're well read. You know, it's not like they're
Yeah.
idiots. You know,
Well, a lot of the most well-known philosophers from the pagan world were very into this stuff. So
right,
there was a whole system behind it. Like from Plato, you get Plotinus. From his school, you get Proclus and Iamblichus, who are very into. Iamblichus was especially into theurgy and the practical magic. So all that stuff still exists in the world, and Freemasonry is kind of this storehouse of all the world's pagan knowledge. And everyone there disagrees about exactly what's going on. Like part of the mystique and the mystery of Masonry is where does this come from? Like where did this start? And nobody really knows. Everyone has their own theories. And when they try to explain the history, they say, according to Masonic tradition, it's like wink, wink, like, this isn't right. According to Masonic tradition, the ancient Masonry guilds would use this little password to identify them. Like we have no idea whether any of that stuff is real. But when Masonry started, the Hermetic stuff was not there. There was actually a lot of Christian stuff in the very beginning, like when it went public in 1717. Yeah, was when the United Grand Lodge of England went public. By 1725, there starts to be Hermetic symbolism because what happened was a lot of the secret societies were banned by their governments, right? The Bavarian Illuminati, obviously. But when you disband these groups, the people don't disappear. They just go undercover and come up somewhere else as something else. So what I think happened was that some of these secret occult groups, when they got disbanded, they saw the structure of Masonry, the structure of the lodges, right? This big national structure, global structure, really. Lots of money there, lots of power there, lots of politics and business there. It's like the perfect little cover for them to join where they can all be part of this and then slowly seed the place with their ideas and also have their own meetings still. But now it's legal for them to do it because they're not Illuminati. Now they're just Freemasons, right?
right.
So it's all about secrecy and compartmentalization. But the guys that are into the magic stuff there are not only Masons. There's other groups they're also part of. They're into, there was one called the Builders of the Diadem that people were into, or the Golden Dawn that people were into.
I'm not familiar with the first one. I'm very familiar with the Golden Dawn.
It's just another one of the
Okay.
Gnostic groups.
Because
It might be a local one.
one of the gentlemen that I met in California, Berkeley, who was a teacher, also was a Mason, but he was very much a Crowleyite. He was a Thelemite, and he saw Thelema as the sort of epitome of all this esotericism and where it was going. And so for him, Crowley's Thelema is the sort of pinnacle of all this stuff. Is that an opinion you're familiar with, or you heard kind of a sentiment you're familiar with in the esoteric community?
So Crowley did the Ordo Templi Orientis, the Lima stuff,
Right.
after becoming a 33rd degree in a lodge called the Rite of Memphis Misraim, which is not part of regular Freemasonry. It's very oriented towards magic and rituals. Like the normal Freemasonry is kind of like this introduction to the world of Gnosticism.
Okay.
It's very light. There's no sex magic. There's no, it's not heavy. It's just very basic. Like when you're doing your rituals, you stand between two pillars, right? And they give you the fake explanation. And they eventually tell you, oh, this is Kabbalah. You're being the middle pillar between, force and mercy or whatever. But it's not practical. Like you don't apply that somehow. The stuff that Crowley was into, the Rite of Memphis, does apply all these ideas. So when I was a Freemason, I was told that if you get caught at a Memphis Misraim meeting, you're going to get kicked out of regular Freemasonry. But then I was also told, But if you go anyway, you're gonna recognize a lot of the people there. So it's like, here's the official warning, but also like half of us are part of this too. So it's like one of those kind of situations. Wow. So from what I mean, I never went to an OTO meeting. I looked into it a little bit. From what I understand, that is kind of the culmination of a lot of the mystery pagan stuff, trying to repeat what was done in the ancient world. And a lot of the old pagan rituals did involve sex, magic, and sacrifice, and grody kind of, degenerate stuff like that, which is one of the points Augustine makes in City of God, where he's responding to people who say, oh, well, the Roman Empire collapsed because we started worshiping Christians instead of the pagan gods. And Augustine said, well, the pagan gods forced you to be degenerates to worship them. And if they wanted your empire to stay together, don't you think they would have taught you some kind of virtue or morality instead of forcing you to sin?
Right.
Because all their little rituals were like orgies, basically. Right. So that's always been what it is. Like, that's always been the core of black magic, has always involved sex and blood to some extent, which I never saw any of in Masonry. Maybe there are subgroups there that do that stuff. But my suspicion is that the people who are part of those groups probably recruit from Masonry for those groups, but that it's not actually part of the structure. Because I think Masonry goes to a lot of effort to keep itself on the level, to give a little Masonic pun, to keep itself above water and looking polite, having a good professional presentation. Like, they don't want the kind of heat that those kinds of rituals would bring.
Right.
But a lot of those guys are probably into it anyway, would be my suspicion.
Right. There was a student at, again, the school that I was attending, or I'm still technically in the process of doing my graduate stuff, but she was getting a MDiv, and she was a theistic Satanist. And she was transgender, and she was talking about this new temple that her...
When you say she...
It was a female. I'm saying the biological gender.
Okay. Yeah, just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. I know it gets very confusing. But she identified as a transgender man who's a lesbian. So trying to work all that out, it's ridiculous. But anyways, it contradicts both. Yeah. So she was a theistic Satanist, and the university was, giving her an MDiv for her theological studies. So she was talking about some of the stuff they do, and she was very open about the inversion of what she considered it as Catholic Mass. Yeah. And so she talked about excrement, blood, menstrual blood specifically, semen, as part of the sort of Eucharistic, the inverted Eucharistic tradition that they are part of.
Yep.
And I think it's really hard for the average person to think that that is something that people do.
Yeah, it's gross.
It is gross. I know, and just the whole realm of like all the presuppositions that get those people there, right? The literal belief in this magic stuff and power, and a lot of them have had abusive pasts, and so the acquirement of power or gnosis or knowledge or something, this is a way to sort of defend yourself off against the world and empower oneself.
Yep.
But getting into the magic and the occult and the Satanism, I think most people don't realize how some people do take this stuff absolutely real, and they do invert the world. And the same thing is the left-hand tantric path in India. I mean, the left-handed path is the inversion of standard normality. And by inverting the world, that's actually going to take you to a point of enlightenment. And so that's what the whole left-handed path is. And Satanism is just it's how we articulate what the left-handed path is in our paradigm.
I understood what Masonry was a mockery of much better once I had left and become Orthodox than I understood as a Protestant. Because as a Protestant, I understood that this was leading you away from Christ. As Orthodox, I understood that it's an upside-down church, because I didn't have liturgy as a Protestant. I didn't have deacons and structure to services, so I didn't realize what it was mocking until I saw what an actual service is. So yeah, it is an upside-down mass or an inverted mass. That's what appeals to people. And I think, like what you said, people who have been abused or they're disaffected Christians are probably some of the biggest believers in some of this stuff.
That was true for this girl. She grew up within Steiner is like was it in theosophy? What's the Rudolf Steiner? What's his tradition called?
Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah, it's like it's another form of these offshoots, and she grew up in a very radical, you know, this sort of a cult, and you could see then, at least from my third person perspective, how that had related to, you know, that trauma that she grew up with, now related to her as this satanic priestess performing these rituals for people in the Bay Area, right? And she talked about how over 50% of the members were part of the LGBTQ community. And so when we see Little Nas in his shoes and all this, again, it is connected. It all is connected in regards to the sort of inverting of society, which we always talk about. But
you know what's interesting about that is that so demons can't create anything, right? They're just like they're mockers and imitators.
Right.
So when the demons create a magic ritual or a service, all they can do is take something the church did and kind of ape it and darken it. And the interesting thing about the theistic Satanists, the ones that actually believe in Satan as a real being, is that even their satanic worldview still exists under the Christian truth, right? Which is that Satan is a real being. So there's no way to get away from Christ, because even when they're trying to fight him, you can't fight something you don't believe in, right?
Right.
So I've said before, I think Nietzsche believed in Christ more than some Christians do, because he spent his whole life fighting the guy.
Right.
Right. Well, you don't fight something you don't believe in. You can scream about it and kick and scream like a child, but you wouldn't fight it if you didn't know there was something there. Right. So the atheistic Satanists are the ones. I was more on that side for most of my Gnosticism, like the atheistic Satanists, where I didn't really believe in anything. I am my own highest being, and I decide what morality is. But I never worshipped the devil. Like, I did conjure demon stuff, but I never got anywhere close to what it sounds like this transgender person.
Right. Literal theistic Satanism. And it's interesting because their rationale is, as you're talking about, they really can't get under the umbrella of Christianity and the truth of Christ. Yet for them, the way that they would articulate it is that, no, we absolutely are, because we are correcting the misunderstanding of who the real light bringer is, right? So it's like the presupposition is always the Lucifer, the light bringer, Prometheus, and that Christ and his slave morality, right? He's the inversion. And Satan is the true light bringer. And so that's how, but of course, that inversion is only based on the dialectical tension between true Christianity and then what they practice.
Yeah. For a while, I was practicing these meditations from a website called the Joy of Satan Ministries that very much believed in that whole thing, where it says the God of the Bible is the bad guy. He's trying to take away all your power and your sex and everything. So Satan will come in and free you. And the funny thing about this is that back in the 2nd century, when Saint Irenaeus of Lyon was writing against heresies, he outright says the root cause of all heresy is a desire for money, sex, or power. Every time. It's never really a search for truth. That's always a cover for some worldly end. And I think that's just as much true today as it ever was, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So now, with everything that we've said, you're in Freemasonry. You're in North Carolina. You went to Hawaii. Now you've come back to the mainland.
I'm in California. Yeah,
California. You're into multiple different rites, deep within Masonry. Where does orthodoxy come into all this stuff?
So I did not know orthodoxy existed until I had already left Freemasonry.
Okay, so then get into why you left Freemasonry before orthodoxy then.
I left Freemasonry because even though I was a Protestant at the time, the more I read the Bible and compared it to Masonry, the more clear it became that I couldn't be both. And eventually I felt the conviction of the Holy Spirit, as the Protestants will say, telling me to leave. At first, it was in the Royal Arch, which is one of the rites you can take after you get the Master Mason degree, or the York Rite, rather. The Royal Arch is one of the bodies within the York Rite. But I was in a Royal Arch meeting where you're wearing red, like your jewelry is red, your aprons are red. And I got this distinctly like crushing feeling like you shouldn't be here. And I kind of just tried to shake it off. You know, I thought maybe I just smoked too much today or something. Maybe I'm just having a bad day. And then I kept, every time I went, I had this bad feeling, you're not supposed to be here. And I was an officer in the Cryptic Council and the Royal Arch, different bodies within the York Rite. So, stepping down from an officer spot causes problems for all your friends because now they have to fill it. and they spend all this time investing in you, teaching you stuff. But I thought, okay, well, I think I have to do this because I feel so uncomfortable here. So I got rid of the Royal Arch. I said, okay, I don't know what that was about, but I feel better now. And then the same feeling would come up in the Blue Lodge and then the Scottish Rite. And it eventually became clear, like, God does not want you here at all. And the hard thing was that was my entire social group at that point. Like, I had never been around a large group of older, successful, established men that are trying to like help you and teach you stuff. I never had anything like that before.
Is this in San Diego?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I basically when I left, I distinctly remember I was in a hot tub. For some reason, I had many spiritual revelations in hot tubs. I don't know why. Like a little mini River Jordan, perhaps.
Jacuzzi.
But I was in a hot tub. Yeah, and I was just praying, and I remember distinctly saying to God in my heart, I said, if I leave Masonry, I'm not going to have anything. Like I will have nothing left in life. And I received this message back. I know how this sounds, but I swear I received this message back from God saying, no, you'll have me. And I was blown away by this. I was like sitting in this, I probably looked like a psycho, just like crying and praying in this hot tub.
Were you around people or were you by yourself?
No. But I was just like, my tears are pouring out of this holy experience that I was having. And so I thought, all right, God has helped me through other stuff when I trusted him, when I didn't think that it was going to work out for me. And he's never led me astray so far. So I thought, okay, I'll leave this all and just trust that there's some bigger plan for all this, And Protestants are very big on God's plan for your life and very encouraging in that way, like trusting God. He's got you, he's got your back. And that was my other social group, I guess, was the Protestant church I was going to. So I just trusted them over the Masons. I told some of my Mason friends, I told most of them where I was going. I said, hey, I'm becoming Christian. I don't think I want to be here anymore. And most of them were polite about it. I said, well, you're not the first one to do this. I'm sure you won't be the last. One of them got kind of angry and sent me a bunch of angry emails saying you're becoming a zealot, a religious bigot.
Were you trying to convert them or something? I mean, was he just angry that you were casting questions onto his own identity because you were rejecting it?
Probably. And this was a guy in his probably 70s who'd been a Mason for decades, who was a member of every group that I was in, who I looked up to a lot as a Masonic role model. Just this nice, sweet old man, all of a sudden accusing me of religious bigotry and saying, if you ever want to come back to the true light, we'll welcome you with open arms. And I was like, okay, I'm good, buddy. Thank you for that. So I left. And then after about a year to a year and a half, again, I have no sense of time, so that might not be accurate, but I think it was between a year and a half of being Protestant. I just started to not love some of the stuff, like the female pastors and the Israeli flag outside of our church. And I started to ask questions about it. And then, do you know who Neon Revolt is by chance?
No, I'm not familiar.
He's got hundreds of thousands of subs on Gab. He was like one of the biggest people in the whole Q movement. But I knew him at the very beginning of all the Q stuff, like before he had a big platform for it. And he's baptized Orthodox, Neon Revolt. And so I was just kind of talking to him, just sharing my experience, because we were just buddies, like saying, hey, I'm looking for something different than this Protestant stuff. I don't agree with the Israel stuff and the female pastors. And he said, oh, you should look into Orthodoxy. I said, oh, well, what is that? He said, oh, it's like this old traditional form of Christianity that I'm part of. I said, that sounds interesting. So then I just Googled it, and there was a church 4.5 minutes from my house. So I went to a Vespers service, and I was horrified by the pictures of Mary and the saints and the idolatry of it all, as I thought at the time.
Right.
But there was something about it. I was like, this feels like stepping out of this crazy world that we live in, like back into something permanent, right. Something eternal. And from then on, I just started reading and studying and praying. And a few years later, here I am on YouTube talking about Orthodoxy and Masonry.
So how long did it take from the Protestant church to were you baptized or chrismated into Orthodoxy?
Baptized. I specifically asked for the baptism because I got baptized Greek Orthodox. They don't rebaptize, quote unquote, but I really wanted the whole experience because I knew there was an exorcism involved, and I'd been baptized Trinitarian in my Wesleyan Protestant church, but the bishop gave my priest permission to baptize me, so I got to have the whole experience, and I'm really glad that I requested that.
Dang. Yeah, we spoke briefly on your stream that I wanted to be baptized, and I just ended up chrismated, but it is what it is.
Did you ask to be?
Huh?
Did you ask to be baptized?
I did ask to be baptized.
Okay.
And my priest, maybe I thought we mentioned this on your stream, maybe we didn't, but
We might have.
my priest was also a convert for, I believe, Methodist tradition, which what I grew up in,
Yeah.
and he said that he didn't want to baptize me because he believed in the validity of the Trinitarian baptism,
Oh yeah, we did talk about this.
and
Yeah.
and so because he said that if he were to baptize me, it would basically question his own status as Orthodox, and
Right.
he's my priest, so I said okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we did talk about it. And there was the confusion with the chat.
Yeah,
I remember.
yeah, I know. And Paisios, then he messaged me, and I had no idea afterwards. I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, brother. I did not. I just saw the comments on the side because, as I'm sure you've experienced, Orthodoxy, because there is truth here. People are anxious to defend it, and I
Yeah.
understand that, right? And that's part
Yeah.
of what we do, just creating content, trying to educate people. So getting emails from more pious individuals, I've sometimes, in the lack of patience, get frustrated or read into other people because of all the emails I've got of people saying negative things or casting aspersions onto myself. And then all of a sudden I start doing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, when I first became Orthodox, I'll confess this. I judged Jay a little bit for the way he would ban people for criticizing him on YouTube. But as my platform has gotten a little bigger, I totally understand. Like, you're trying to help people, you're trying to teach people stuff. You don't want to deal with it. Like, it's not worth the time investment of responding to people that are just there to nitpick and throw stones. So like, I totally get it.
Right.
You're supposed to love your enemy, but that doesn't mean you're supposed to like waste hours of your time when you're trying to do a good deed, just dealing with them,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I'm glad I was a Wesleyan first, though. I could not have become Orthodox straight from Masonry and the occult. So I needed that transition period of learning to love God and really hyper focus on reading the scriptures. Like, that kind of served as a foundation for what I later did. And I'm especially glad that the church I ended up going to was Wesleyan, because I still think John Wesley was the best of the Protestants,
Yeah.
compared to Luther or Calvin.
Oh, agreed. 100%. I
They-
mean, just the
they
fact,
love
just,
orthodoxy.
sorry, just the
They
fact
love
that
that.
his theology, he was reading St. Macarius the Great, and he,
Yeah.
the sanctification doctrine, which is basically him trying to Protestantize theosis.
Yes, totally.
He was trying to reach back to something more older, as opposed to just being, I mean,
Yeah.
he's still, creating something new, but he's not as much as a reformer, I would say, as the Calvins of the world.
Yeah. Like, the theological leap was not that big from that to Orthodox. I mean, the liturgy was different, and the saints and the icons.
Right.
Even Wesley was not against saints. He just saw it like, yeah, you can venerate them if you want to, but we're not going to like dogmatize that you have to. But the Trinitarian and what they call Arminian, which is just not Calvinism, So it wasn't a huge leap in terms of the actual foundational beliefs of who Christ is and who God is and all that. So I got a good background, and I don't regret being a Protestant or anything like that. And I still love the people there. Like, they taught me to love God and the Bible. How can I hold that against them?
Right, absolutely. Well, and as much as we're Orthodox and we try to do apologetics, and there's the Catholic Protestant bashing, it's like one of the things that I've been speaking to recently, because it's literally all around me, as I'm surrounded by, here in South Central Indiana, Protestantism. It's by far the dominant theology. And there's not a single Orthodox church that I can go to in Indiana that isn't requiring Mass. My parish, because I refuse to go to church and wear a Mass, my priest made an accommodation, and I stand into a room adjacent to the sanctuary and watch it on TV. That's the accommodation that he made for me. And then I only come into the sanctuary to receive the Eucharist, and then I walk right back out. And yet, at the same time, the rock band church that we make fun of has a congregation of 200 and 250 people. Nobody's wearing a mask. Nobody's not going to church when they tell you not to. And it's like,
they've really put us to shame during this whole pandemic situation with their zeal for truth, and they're suing the government over it, and their defiance, whereas our bishops almost universally caved, almost universally immediately.
right.
So sometimes I feel like we throw the baby out with the bathwater when we bash Protestants, which is, I try not to bash them, because there's a lot that I like about what they do. that I think the Orthodox used to do and should still be doing.
Right.
I like their zeal for evangelism. I like their standing up for the truth and not letting the government oppress them. You know, I think that's stuff that we should do more of. They're refusing to bow down to the CNN narrative is a great thing.
Right.
You know, and it's just, you know, you get the leaders you get sometimes, and you don't have to obey your bishops when they're in error, which is nice. You know, sometimes we're taught that absolute blind obedience is a virtue, and it's not. That's not the patristic view of it. If the bishops are making mistakes, you don't follow them into their mistakes.
Right.
I will not ever wear a mask to church. I never have.
Right. I've yet to.
I'm fortunate to be at a parish where it's a choice you have. You know, you want to get some dirty looks or snide remarks every once in a while, but it's a choice. And so I choose to not ever do it. And if people bring it up, I just bring up that fear of death as a sin. And I try, you know, it's rarely effective to talk about the statistics of the virus and all that stuff, because if they're brainwashed, they're brainwashed.
Right.
But you can bring up that the church has never responded like this before. You can bring up what's the point of venerating saints for their eternal life if you're afraid of death, you know?
Right. How do we sing the cherubic hymn to lay aside all our earthly cares?
Yeah,
and you're wearing a mask when you're singing. Like the people are literally pulling the mask from their lips while they're trying to sing it. It's like, what is going on?
I know. And my priest, just in his sermons, he says, don't judge other people for the way they're choosing to deal with this, which is not, you know, full on Father Josiah, like ranting against it. But it is diplomatic, and it is, you know, it hasn't, I don't think it stopped anyone from going. So he's trying to do what's best by everybody, which is a hard thing to do. In our parish, is a decent number of people too. But yeah, most people I would say do not wear masks, even inside. When we do go inside, if we have a small enough number of people to do it.
Yeah.
Or if it's like,
speaking about Protestant zeal, did you see Mike Liddell, his most recent claim that Trump will be back in August?
I stopped paying attention to all of that. I just completely stopped caring about politics and Trump. And
I tried to as well, but I just saw it was coming up. I don't know if you had come across that and seen that.
No, I mean, the Q people had so many different guaranteed dates for big things.
Oh, I know it.
And every time the goalpost would move when it didn't happen. So I just thought, well, this is obviously fake, and I can't afford any more emotional investment in this, because I can only take so much disappointment on like any given person or topic.
So, do you see somebody like Mike Liddell from My Pillow as somebody who's also duped by all these things, or he's too attached to Trumpism? Or how do you? Because I mean, that guy is like using his own money. He's actually stepping out, even though again it seems like preposterous claims are being made.
I try to view people charitably, and I don't always succeed. In fact, I often don't succeed. And it's hard when there's so many grifters in the whole, you know, conservative movement as well, or just there to take money and do nothing with it, which is like all Republican politicians, more or less. I'm not going to vote for Trump if he runs again. Personally, I already voted for him twice. I'm kind of over it. I think that a lot of boomers turned Trump into their new god, which is really unfortunate. Where, you know, we have the Orange Man bad memes, but Orange Man good is equally a meme. You know, any criticism of Trump, they do Orange Man good, and then they attack you for criticizing their political messiah.
Right.
You know, I think they probably mean well, and they're just getting duped, is my guess. I try not to view people as intentionally malicious. Sometimes people act so consistently that you can't see it as anything but intentional malice anymore. But I try to at least give people the benefit of the doubt. I think Mike Liddell must believe it. I mean, he's putting his whole life.
He's putting millions of dollars into fighting Dominion with lawsuits, going out and paying for whole hour blocks on OAN to do his own documentary specials. I mean, clearly he absolutely believes in it.
Trump raised, I want to say, $225 million to fight campaign fraud, and then spent $8 million fighting campaign fraud, and no one knows where the other $200 million went. I don't think Liddell is doing that sort of like shifty money shell company. Who knows where it's going? I think he probably really believes in it. And maybe he's just bored, honestly. Like, if you're a guy of that age and you have a successful business, and maybe you just want something to do, and this is like a thing to do, you know, a cause to dedicate. Some people just want a cause, and it doesn't even necessarily matter what the cause is. Everyone needs a purpose, right? But yeah, you know what? God bless him, and I wish
Right.
him the best.
That basically sums up my perspective as well. So back to where we were. I want to know, like, the trend, what the period of time from the Protestant church into Orthodoxy. Like, were you reading Orthodoxy? You go to the Vesper service,
Yeah.
like, because for me, and we talked on your stream, it was a very intellectual transition. Was Orthodoxy an intellectual thing for you? It seemed like it was almost
Yeah.
a heart-centered thing, also with you feeling like this was eternal when you went to the Vespers. Because so can speak to your conversion to the process, the transformation of life.
It was both. I mean, there's a lot to learn about Orthodoxy. Um, I had a lot. I mean, every step of becoming Christian, I had a set of objections that had to be overcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I first became Christian, I was reading in Proverbs, no adultery. So I thought, okay, good Christians don't sleep with other people's spouses. But it wasn't months later till I realized you weren't supposed to have sex at all outside of marriage. Like I was really coming from zero knowledge. And then for a while, I was still holding on to my Hermetic beliefs, and I identified as a Cather for a while, like a Gnostic Christian. I'm trying to meld the two worlds. And when I started looking into Orthodoxy, I was actually not fully Trinitarian yet. So I got into big fights on Facebook with the whole Orthodox internet. You know, now I have the vocabulary to say I believed what Arius believed, but just reading the scriptures, believing in sola scriptura and my own interpretation, I didn't understand the Trinity really.
Right.
Ironically, it was a Jews for Jesus article that convinced me about the Trinity. Going through Genesis, like, let us create man in our image. I was like, well, there it is. It's plural, you know? Because when I would argue with people on Facebook, they would appeal to councils. And I said, I don't care what the council says. Why would that matter? The Bible says this. Why? Well, council, who cares? You know? Now I'm a little bit wiser, I think. I hope. Even though it sounds, okay, I got to bring up this interjection.
Yeah,
here,
go
though.
ahead.
So I told you I was reading this book, this amazing book that I'm loving called Two Paths, Orthodoxy and Catholicism.
Uh-huh.
And it seems like between the fourth and fifth councils, they disagreed with each other in a certain sense. So I'm still trying to figure out how infallible ecumenical councils are in the Orthodox world and whether one can overwrite something another one says. I don't really get that part yet. But the point was, at the time I was arguing about the Trinity, I didn't care at all what any council said because I saw that as a tradition of man. You know, I had to learn what tradition meant and the Pharisaic tradition. And actually, as long as I'm on the topic, am I wrong in seeing that between the fourth and fifth councils, the 3 chapters of the Nestorian writings were first cleared by one and then condemned by another? Am I misreading this? Do you know anything about this 3 chapters issue?
No, I am not. I am not too familiar on that particular issue.
Because my understanding is that we consider the councils to be infallible in all of the canons and things that they say, but it looks like this topic, they changed their minds. So maybe I'm misunderstanding it. I got to figure that out. But the more I studied Orthodoxy, you know, I said in my chat with Robin Riley, when you study church history with an open mind, you're going to end up either Catholic or Orthodox. Like there's no way to really believe in Protestantism once you understand what the church is. And like when every church father, this was a big part of it. I remember reaching a point where I had to ask myself, what is more likely, that all of the students of the apostles were right and I just don't understand, or that all of them were wrong and I'm just smarter than them because I have the book that they wrote? You know, there was no chance that I was right. So I really had to swallow my pride and fight my ego to become Orthodox. But what really converted me was when I found Father Josiah Trenum on YouTube, and I emailed him. I said, hey, I'd like to visit. He said, sure. Guy gets hundreds of emails a day and yet somehow manages to respond to most or all of them, despite everything else he does. I don't know when the guy sleeps. And I went to his church and I talked with him for 15 or 20 minutes. And I was just so blown away by his presence and his character and the way he runs his parish and the love everyone had for him. I thought, if this is the kind of man that Orthodoxy turns you into, then I want what this is. So I basically drove home and became a catechumen that week.
Wow.
Yeah,
Trenum was a huge deal for me too. I was mentioning this. I did a voice chat last night in the Church of the Eternal Logos group chat over on Telegram. Join if you guys aren't there. Please join the Telegram. We have a fun time. And so I mentioned that for me, I started to go to church, the Orthodox churches. So for me, I took that semester, as everybody knows, of Orthodox theology. I kind of had that, but I was definitely a non-believer. Then the summer, I start to identify as Christian, but they're certainly not Orthodox, not going to church regularly, just seeing the cultural utility, but more comfortable to say that I'm promoting these things. I'm
Right.
Christian.
Right.
And
Right.
then reading a little bit more church fathers, by the fall, got much more into it. Eventually, I say, okay, I can't deny this stuff anymore. And so I start going to parishes in the Bay Area. And I would go, there's an OCA church there in Berkeley, California. And so one of my friends at school, he is also Orthodox, and he's getting his PhD. I'm not sure if it's an academic or it's a divinity doctorate, theological doctorate, but he had called the priest, letting him know that I was coming, and I wasn't actually aware of that. So when I got there, the priest knew my name and knew I was coming. So that was almost like, oh, geez, this he's on it. Then I find out my friend had texted him and he knew I was coming. But
Okay.
he told me, oh, just stand here. And eventually after the liturgy, I went up to the front to get a blessing. And then he started asking me, what brought me to the Orthodox Church? Why am I here? And I started, I took this class and I was reading the church fathers, and I'm really liking Maximus the Confessor and Palamas, and I've been reading Chrysostom. And I said, and then, online, I've been really following this priest, Father Josiah Trenum. And he said, oh, really? And then he looked over, and there's this like tall blonde kid over to his left. I forget your name, brother. But it was Father Josiah Trenum's son. He was an undergraduate over at the University of Berkeley. And so he
Nice.
showed me around the parish, and we sat and had lunch with the rest of the parish. And then the priest ended up coming and sitting with us and had a great conversation. And I told him, like, dude, your dad's like awesome. Like he's part of me getting into orthodoxy. Like there's the YouTube talks of him condemning homosexuality to a degree which it really resonated with me, because I felt all that stuff, but being in Berkeley, you can't say it. And then even looking for people who would say it, not people speak with that type of fervor like Trenum does. And so just to see that powerful voice, I was like, oh yeah. So I started diving into all his videos and lectures, and telling his son, basically, your dad had a huge role in me becoming, or being here right now talking to you, like the providence of this whole thing. And I'm sure he gets that all the time. All of the kids. What, he got like 11 children?
I think he had 10 last time I checked. He might have 11 now.
Okay. But yeah, so Trenum for me, he was a big deal. And I that's amazing that you've ever been able to meet him in person. I would love to be able to meet him in person and talk to him.
A lot of people in Southern California have been fleeing to his church as COVID refugees from other parishes, because he does no restrictions, no nothing. They all got sick, and he still kept going with no restrictions. Just fully open, from what I understand. I actually haven't been there in a long time.
Right. And
Big-
he's
big
Antiochian.
campus, lots
And
of
this is
people.
what I appreciate about Trenum so much, is I'm also Antiochian. Well, what's your jurisdiction?
I tend not to say online just because I don't need anyone like coming after me and
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
finding.
Yeah. Yep. So,
It's not Greek. I'm comfortable saying that.
okay.
Not
Well,
Greek.
my jurisdiction cat is out of the bag. And Metropolitan Joseph has issued, basically all parishes across the U.S. basically have to listen to the federal authorities and local authorities in regards to whatever their policies are. We're supposed to implement those. And me being very outspoken, telling them I'm not gonna wear it, and if you're gonna force me, because there was talks before the Maniac Mass that we're gonna have to take our temperatures to enter the church. I told him, like, that's not going to happen. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave, and I'm going to talk about my experience. So,
Yeah.
I can't do that. Like, you're asking me to violate my own conscience.
Yeah.
And so, again, luckily, I have a great spiritual father who agrees with me, and then is also caring for the rest of the parish, who's the majority, who see things a little bit differently. So I
Yeah.
understand the plight that he's
Councils
in.
make a big difference on that too.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Like when a parish council gets taken over by lefties or CNN watchers, that changes the whole dynamic of everything.
That right there was a huge one for me when I entered Orthodoxy. To see people that were the CNN watchers that were, they read the church fathers. They were Orthodox on Sunday. Just talking to them, you'd think that they were a base conservative, whatever. And then you see that outside church on their social medias, on whatever, that they're leftists, they're promoting progressivism, they're Democrats, like they're mocking anybody who actually holds the values that is taught at the church we all go to on Sunday.
It's caused a lot of problems, yeah.
I was just blown away that even existed, because because my exposure to the online orthodoxy before getting into it, it's like it was so well read. It was people that take it pretty seriously. And then to get into the parish and see just this an internal contradiction that it just seems so extreme. It's mind-blowing how people can't see it within themselves. But again, I'm sure there's plenty of things within myself that I'm doing the exact same thing. So,
yeah. I mean, I think this is what Luke is trying to do with orthodoxy first, like promote the old traditional stuff. I mean, I haven't had a full conversation with him yet. He's going to come on my show tomorrow night. So I hope to get some more information on.
Yeah. What time will he be on? So everybody watching right now can tune into you guys.
I want to say 5. Let me check my Telegram real quick. He will be on, I'm going to say 5 p.m. Pacific.
Oh, okay. 5 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah. Because I didn't want to do it during one of his streaming days, and it's good that we're doing this at this time because he's going to be on in a couple hours, and so we won't be overlapping.
Well, that's what I try to do. I personally, I'm on Eastern time. I like to do the around the 5 o'clock stream time, just because I can get it done. I get too amped up talking that I can't stream till like 11 at night because I try to go to bed by then, so I'd be wired for the next few hours. Do you get
some of my streams start at 11 p.m.
Do you get energy from doing the streams? Is it hard for you to wind down immediately afterwards?
For the first hour. Well, I go to sleep at like 3 most nights. So, how are you on Eastern time if you're in Indiana?
We're Eastern Standard.
In Indiana? Oh, okay. Because it's right next to Illinois, but Illinois is not Eastern.
Correct.
So I didn't realize.
Correct. Yeah, Illinois is not Eastern, but Indiana is.
I grew up in Chicago, so
yeah, it actually causes a lot of problems for people who work in surrounding states. Anything west of Indiana, like the people that work in Missouri or Illinois, they have to deal with a terrible time difference.
Gotcha. I know Mike's trying to get Fuentes to come to the trad forum too, but I guess he's hard to get a hold of these days.
I've heard. I don't follow his content too much recently, but I heard that they're really out for Fuentes in regards to deplatforming him.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I stopped watching all political stuff for Lent, so I don't know what he's up to now. But I mean, that would be a big draw for bringing people to the room too.
That would certainly buy. Yeah, I think some people would buy some tickets.
Yeah,
that would be great.
Michael Jones is a huge draw too, so I'm glad.
I'm excited just to meet EMJ and talk to him.
That should be fun. I had talked with him on YouTube a couple years ago, but I haven't met him in person yet.
Yeah, I've yet to talk to him on YouTube. I was wanting to. I have his Logos Rising book. I have his Jewish Revolutionary Spirit book. But I would like to maybe have a conversation with him at some point.
He's a nice guy.
So, what prompted you, now that you, in your journey, you became Orthodox, what prompted you to create your YouTube channel and kind of do what you're doing now?
So I have always been the kind of person that whatever I'm learning about, I'm just excited to share with other people.
Okay.
So even when I was a degenerate, I was sharing stuff I learned about that with other people. So this is not like a new personality trait for me. It's just now that I have found the end of the rabbit hole, I think is how you described Christ in one of your videos.
Right.
You take the ultimate Christ pill, the final pill, right?
Yeah.
Make sense of everything else. I started with no audience, just like talking about things I found interesting into the camera. And I do nothing to promote the channel. I don't even remember to tell people to subscribe, frankly. So it's kind of a miracle. It's gotten up to a few thousand subs now. It's just people sharing. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Twitter. People just share it. And over time, you can see like what kind of stuff people are interested in and what kind of stuff they don't care about as much just by the view counts, Mm-hmm. Like I know if videos about Jordan Peterson, I know we'll get certain number of thousand of views, but I can only talk about him so much,
Right.
The E. Michael Jones video got a lot of views, a couple tens of thousands of views, both on my channel and on his. People really like book reviews that I do. And I think that because of my background of growing up Jewish and then being a Satanist and being into the occult and being a Freemason, like I think I have a unique perspective on some of these topics that you might not necessarily hear from other people. And also my ethnicity also gives me a little bit of leeway to criticize certain things without being called names or deplatformed.
Right. Yeah.
Even though when they wrote about me on howtofighantisemitism.com, I was always wondering, how are they going to get around my ethnicity? They just referred to me as ex-Jewish. So they denied my identity, my ethnic identity, called me an ex-Jewish anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist. So you get stuff like that sometimes. But yeah, I just like to share what I'm learning and helping other people hopefully avoid some of the problems that I got myself into in life. I don't regret anything I've done because I don't believe in regret as an emotion in general. I believe in repentance,
right?
But I don't spend time like, oh, I wish I'd made this choice instead. What if? What? It's a waste of time, you know. So I just say, hey, here's what I did. Here's where it led me. It didn't work out, and this is a better option. And I know most of my audience is between 25 and 34, young guys. So yeah, hopefully I'm just helping them make sense of what they're experiencing and helping them go down the right path, you know.
Do you have long-term ambitions in regards to content creation or building?
I have no plan. I've never had a plan. You know, my book on the Masons and their lives has been a bestseller in 4 or 5 categories now. I wrote it to there was no audience. I didn't have any. I wrote that before I had a YouTube channel. I think there was no one that I was like, oh, here's an audience that I'll give this book to. It's like, this is something I think God wants me to do. I think this is a good, helpful thing to do for the kingdom of God. So I'm just going to do it. And it's gone all over the world. I mean, there's a priest in Cyprus that wanted me to ship my book out there, but the shipping was like $40 or something. So I sent it to a friend in Florida who's going to go visit him in Cyprus. Like, people all over the world are reading this. There was a Serbian guy who said he was going to translate it. I don't know what happened to that. But yeah, you know, when God has a plan for you, the nice part is you don't have to make any plans for yourself. You just keep, the way I see it is like, I'm just keeping my foot on the pedal, you know, and I'm letting God take the wheel. Like, I'm just going to keep talking, keep making stuff, and it's up to him where it goes and who it reaches. But I do think at some point, for my own aesthetic purpose, I'm probably going to have to deplatform myself and become anonymous at some point, just to take away the pride of having a platform and being a person of importance or whatever. Like, I see the temptations that come with that too, because I do. You know, you're always tempted to think of yourself as special because you have people listen to you and all that.
Right.
And I was reading 30 Steps to Heaven, and one of the early steps is exile, like really death to the world, which in this case would mean taking down my YouTube. Not yet. It's not going to be anytime soon, I don't think, but probably at some point. But no, I'm very intentional about not making a career. Like, I don't want to be a professional Christian. I don't want this to pay my bills, because I never want to be in a position where the thought goes through my head, I want more money, I should make more Christian content. I never want to put myself in that position.
Right.
Because that will take away from like the purity of what I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I don't want to mix that with worldly concerns of that nature.
So that's interesting, because the way you frame that, I don't see myself as, because I have career ambitions. I mean, this YouTube channel is literally me throwing all my eggs into something, because the 9 years of academia, I get to basically right before my dissertation and realize I can't work at the university. I've spent all of my 20s building up to this point, and now it's like I don't even know what to do. I was giving up the psychedelic stuff, and so the Church of Eternal Logos, that was like, again, for me, it was from the onset trying to figure out how I can do what I'm passionate about and try to make some money. And I took my life savings for that first year and lived off of it.
Wow.
And so the way you described it, I try not to see myself as create Christian content equals I make more money. I try to see it as I have a body of knowledge due to God's providence in my own journey and my own skills that if I can help people connect dots, which is what I'm doing, because for me, the hours I spend to prepare for a stream by reading or doing the research is just bettering and building upon a foundation that I already have. And so for me, it's like it's just a huge tumbleweed that's just continuing to move forward in time. I do feel awkward, though, because of the orthodox nature of the content, that for me, I am explicit that please go to my website and sign up, because that is my income, right? Please become a website member or help me. And so it's like this, difficult line to walk because I
Well, there's
want to be a good
also,
Orthodox, but it's like
yeah.
I don't have any other options. This is it.
Well, I know you also told me you want to have a family like relatively soon. So I'm in a position right now where at the moment I don't have anyone depending on me. So I don't have to worry about money really,
Right.
like I'm not rich, but I'm not like on the verge of homelessness either. That might change. Like at some point, if I have a kid and I might say, you know what, well, maybe I'll turn my YouTube channel into a real business. Because, I've run businesses before. I was a professional copywriter.
Oh,
Um, Before I stopped doing all that, I was a business consultant, dealing with people that, some of them were making lots and lots of money. But I just I didn't like doing that anymore. It's ironic. I shut it down because I wanted to be more ascetic and didn't want to have like a public platform. And God was like, well, that's cute, but here, have this platform instead. But at least it's an Orthodox platform now instead of a business-based one.
right.
But I mean, if I have someone to take care of, maybe it'll become a business at some point and I'll take it more seriously in that way. Because right now it really is just like a hobby. And yes, I'm trying to get my book out there because it's an important topic. And the more people I reach, the more good it can do. Which when I first started doing business, I mean, that was a lot of mental hurdles to cross. Like, okay, what degree of trickery do I use in advertising, And what I kept hearing was, well, if your product is good and you want people to see it, you owe them doing whatever you can, which is kind of a cop out for immorality at a certain level.
Yeah, I can see that.
Really is. Well, ends justify the means, which is not a Christian way of viewing it.
Right, not at all.
But so far, I mean, my lack of building this as a business has not stopped it from
Growing.
becoming. Yeah, I mean, I get invited on streams that are much bigger than mine, like yours, like Robin Riley's, like Jay Dyer's. So I know the stuff I'm talking about, people resonate with and they're curious about.
Well, clearly, I mean, want to have a conversation with you. I've watched your streams. The first stream I watched of yours was talking about propretarianism, I believe.
Oh yeah. Did you see my debate with Kurt Doolittle?
No, it was right after that, and so you were rehashing everything, and I basically got the summation, and then I watched the stream. I think you were talking about some event he was at, and I think he peed himself or something.
The Richmond event, yeah. But according to him, it was just sweat that happened to gather only in one particular part of his body. So maybe he has a medical condition I don't know about. I wasn't there, but people who were there claimed that was what happened. Yeah, that debate was, I was just basically getting yelled at and cursed at for the better part of an hour in our quote unquote debate. But the point of that was to expose him, and to show Christians this guy's not on your side. He'll give you lip service to try and pull you into his world, but he doesn't. He hates you, He hates Christianity, he hates God. He accused me of lying the whole time. And I kept asking, what do you mean by lying? Like, what am I deceiving about? And at the end, it turns out that by what he calls the Abrahamic method of deceit is just a belief in God and the soul in the afterlife. That's the lie, according to him, that I was telling the whole time. I kept saying, what am I lying about, man? And it was a disaster, but it was a good disaster. There's like 700 comments almost on that video now. I think a lot of people who may have gotten sucked into this like secular right-wing thing now understand that this doesn't lead anywhere. When I was still a Protestant, I went to a conference that American Renaissance put on, like a nationalist right-wing conference, just to hear what the speakers had to say. Because I was getting curious about all these topics, about race and culture and all this stuff that I had never really studied growing up. And I remember walking away from it thinking, there's no solutions here. Like, God wasn't part of the conversation. And so I think it's bound to fail if God is not. It's building the house on sand instead of rock.
Right.
So, I mean, I met Jared Taylor, I met Richard Spencer, I met Nathan D'Amico, I met all those guys. And honestly, this was 2018, 2017 or 2018. That was the end of my involvement in the quote unquote alt-right. I was like, well, there's nothing lasting here. Some of their ideas are on the right track, but if the center of your worldview is your race, for example, instead of God, then you're not going to be able to build anything meaningful. Not that race has no meaning, because it does have a meaning, but it can't be the focus of your identity.
Exactly. It totally misplaces the actual state of things, is that all races are created.
Yeah.
And so the beginning point has to be God, and so we can establish true unity. Unity is that we're all created in the image of God. Now there is a multiplicity of races, there's a multiplicity of languages, which are different and have innate differences and are unique and beautiful in their own ways. And because in Orthodox theology, from my understanding, in the relationship, the theology behind the national churches is then Christianity says they need to be preserved, that the differences need to be preserved. So that's where then I think the propaganda and the social enforcement of, well, really just interracial mixing, you see it on all the commercials. Not that interracial people don't have beautiful marriage, of course. The sinister part is that it's literally brainwashing people.
Yeah, it's forced. That's the problem with it.
Right, and it's to destroy a particular set of genetic characteristics.
And when someone's trying to force something on you, it's rarely because they have your best interests at heart. But I see Orthodox parishes as like the perfect example of how different races can live together.
Yes,
because you have people of every color and whatever, and we're all the same tribe. Nobody's getting into these little racial fights. Occasionally you'll find that, but it's pretty rare. You have Christ as the center of everything. So we have our different cultures and our different backgrounds, like you're Arab, you're Black, you're Jewish, whatever. There's actually a lot of Jewish converts to Orthodoxy, believe it or not. Maybe I just found all of them, so it seems like a lot. But you're all on the same group. So I've always said, like, I understand, I've seen all the FBI stats on race and crime, and I understand a lot of what people like Richard Spencer are talking about from that perspective. But they're looking at an America that is deliberately taught to hate other people, where Christ has been deliberately pulled out of the equation. So when you look at this and you say, look, the races can't get along, look at the crime rate. Okay, well, what would that look like if Christianity was the center of the country and Marxism was banned, right? And there was no one allowed to deliberately promote racial hatred of other groups.
Exactly.
You have no idea what it might look like. So you can't extrapolate like this kind of intrinsic incompatibility, I don't think, in the context in which America currently is. Like, why don't we try adding Christ and subtracting Marx before we decide that we just can't live together and stuff of that nature?
Right.
You know what I mean?
So it's like a perfect rhetorical game. As Christ becomes extracted from society, the progressive voice then points at all the disruption in society due to that evacuation. And so they're really just highlighting the absence of God, the absence of Christ in society, and then blaming that. I think that's where the whole anti-white sentiment, particularly the white male, is. Again, they're trying to put it back on Christ. And just due to historical providence, Christianity spread through European peoples. And so in my mind, and I could be totally wrong, but just the way that I'm seeing the state of the world, it feels like the anti-white sentiments is really just a faux presentation of Satan's larger agenda to destroy the values, the foundations of Christendom itself. And so you just blame all these people in the male patriarchy, and really what you're doing is you're just attacking Christianity.
Well, the irony is that, Ethiopia was Christian before the Roman Empire was. Armenia was Christian before the Roman Empire was. But I do think that in the minds of the engineers, there is a connection between white people.
I mean, Christianity is a Mediterranean religion, but again, it didn't spread around the world. There wasn't historical Ethiopia didn't go and convert the Spaniards. Ethiopia really didn't convert South America. Yeah. So
there is the association in their minds for sure. And it's just very, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it, right?
Exactly.
Like, and you can't unsee the anti-Christian stuff. Like, I've noticed in every Hollywood movie, if there's a character wearing a cross, they're always a villain. Always a criminal. They're a gangster. They're a thug. They're a drug abuser.
Yeah, and often Russian. Interestingly.
Yeah, they can't even present a Christian as normal in Hollywood. The normal people are not going to be wearing a cross. Once you start to notice that stuff, you can never unsee it.
Right.
And it just becomes so obvious what the agenda is. And then you have all these people that are professional dividers, right? The professional Black Lives Matter, the professional race haters, the professional Al Sharptons, right? Where their riches come from this fake racial victimhood. So when people like that are allowed to do that, of course the races are not going to get along. There's people with big platforms and lots of money that grow their power specifically by doing that. Right. So you need to lock these people up and bring Christ back in.
Yes.
And I bet things would look a lot better.
I totally agree. And this, I think, is a perfect bridge to another topic that I wanted to hit on with you briefly. Is again these esoteric trends in the occult and how we're seeing them play out within our society itself. So again, as Christ is extracted, the occult theology becomes implemented. And when one that I wrote down is androgyny, and androgyny seen as a higher ideal than male and female. That male and female insinuates separateness, and that God can't be male and female. Therefore, God must be the amalgamation of male and female. And so you get Baphomet. You get these hermaphroditic, androgynous depictions of a divine figure. And this is replete throughout all of occultism. And it's ancient. This isn't new. This is ancient. And so I can't help but see then the ladyboy, right? The transgenderism.
The Bible specifically writes against transgenderism, right? Against dressing up in the clothes of the opposite sex. Paul writes that 2,000 years ago.
Right. And so what do we see now? We see we see the same patterns, the same trends of the occult. Again, it's just playing out at a societal level, and androgyny and the transgender man, the man who thinks he's a woman, is the ideal. I think it's like, you know, the chick with a dick is like, it's like their thing. It is the full embodiment of what they worship.
Yeah, it's grotesque. It's difficult. So topics like this, or Father Josiah's hold the line against radical LGBT, it's tough to balance the speaking out against the movements with the pastoral approach to the individuals suffering from the problems. So I want to be clear. I'm not condemning people who suffer from gender dysphoria, which is a horrible mental illness that I wouldn't wish my worst enemy.
Agreed.
I'm talking about the deliberate promotion of it as a virtue.
Yeah, in that this is coming down from top down, right? This isn't just organically we've had a bunch of people identify this way in our society. This is from institutional level.
It's like 0.5% of people that, if you just look at TV and media, you'd think was like 40% of all Americans. Right. So masculinity, how do I phrase? Okay, I know how to phrase this. So what protects children from evil the most is a strong Christian father, right?
Amen.
He is a Christian father, a straight male Christian father. Sad I have to specify that, is like the icon of God really on earth, right? He's the father, the protector, the provider. All those traits are embodied in the straight male father. And that is the best protection that children have from Satan and the wiles of the devil. So the straight male father, now in America, the straight male white father, even though this harms everyone equally, is enemy number one, because without a father to protect kids, they're very easy prey, right?
Right.
I don't know what it is with women, man, where they're so easy to mislead with all this gay stuff and tranny stuff. Like, they're the ones bringing their kids to drag queen story hour at libraries. Right. You don't see a lot of dads in that room, right? And the dads that are there are probably like
they're emasculated, they're feminized. They have no moral foundation, right? I guarantee you they don't have boundaries. They're not establishing boundaries in the household. They're not assuming the role.
And the promotion of soy boys and beta maleness is very deliberate for the same reason. I still remember, I forgot what magazine it was. Some big pop culture magazine had a headline called "The Rise of the Beta Male," and they show these 4 actors, probably with a combined testosterone level of 200 at best, with their hand in each other's pockets, like promoting this as the virtuous thing, right? To be weak, because a weak man cannot protect children, which are the easiest to mislead, And if Satan gets you when you're 5, your whole life's going to be difficult.
And Christ said the children are closest to him. The children are innocent. And so for me,
the devil wants that.
So the abortion, the children transgenderism, the pedophilia, this is like Satan's, again, historical attack on the most innocent. That's the most depraved thing you can do, right? It's one thing to convince somebody through their own free will to become degenerate as an adult. Many of us do. It's one thing beyond somebody's free will. That you basically ruin a child's life. You harm their soul. Like, again, if they're molested as a child, the recidivism rate as they grow up to become a pedophile themselves because the first time they had an orgasm was some old man, it's terrible. I mean, you're destroying a person.
Yeah, for the rest of their lives. And the ones that recover still have struggles because of it. And it's if you think about it the way I do, I usually just blame men for being weak when I see problems in society. I really don't blame women.
And people that watch this channel, I do not blame. I mean, we talk about the problems with modern women, but that only exists because men are so weak.
100% agree. I mean, not to quote Nietzsche, but he was right when he said, what did he say? When men become weak, women become mannish.
Yes, that's what we have. That's exactly what we have.
So if you look at what's happened to America in the last 70 years, I see that as weak men who can't say no or can't fight for things that matter, right?
Right. They can't resist. Like the saying
Yeah,
no is the ability to
conservative has
resist.
lost every battle for 70 straight
Yeah.
years.
Yep.
And it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible that men cannot say no. They have no boundaries anymore. They're taught to worship women as little mini deities running around, which is just as bad for women as it is for the rest of society.
Yes, it is.
And when you grow up being worshipped because you happen to have certain genitals,
right,
and for no other reason, not because you're good at something or because you're smart or because you have some trait that makes you valuable to the world beyond the shape of your body, I mean, you're never going to develop as a real person,
Right. And
Why,
so, go ahead.
Meme of like the pretty bobblehead woman. It's like, well, she never developed a personality because she's been worshipped since she was 5.
Right.
Why she had no reason to have a personality that would not add anything to what she already has achieved.
Exactly. No, and it's like Satan, again, I don't mean to be so like Protestant Bible thumping when I use that word, but just in regards to the indulgence of sin, that is how man becomes weak. And so when we look at this idolization of the woman or the pedalization due to the sexualization, so as we become more engrossed into sexual fantasies, we become more hedonistic. We literally lose our power. We literally, again, Christ tells us this is the nature of reality. We become weaker. We move closer to death.
Absolutely. And I always believe, so there's this idea that the men should be the leaders, which of course I agree with, but I also believe that men are leading whether they realize it or not. So when I see a woman who's very badly behaved, what I see is a weak father or a weak boyfriend. That's what I see. That's the result, because whether you realize it or not as a man, women are still following you. And if you're going to be weak, they're going to have to pick up the slack, but that's still a response to you, Right. You're permanently, intrinsically leading in a certain sense. That's just how we're designed, right? We were made first, women were made from us.
Right. Exactly. No, I use that analogy all the time regarding Eden, and the correct authoritative order is God, man, woman, children. And that woman has a disposition based on just the narrative of Eden. When we look at it, a woman has a disposition towards the world, and that makes sense, given the nurturing role. She's a helper. We help each other. Right. We have different roles. Man's focus is transcendent. Man's focus should be away from the world. The woman's focus is towards the world. And because of that, the woman then is more susceptible to listen to temptation. And so the woman does indulge in the temptation. But we didn't fall when Eve ate the apple. It wasn't until Adam broke the authoritative order and rejected God and listened to the woman who listens to the world instead of listening to God who created the world. And maybe that is the fall.
Instead of original sin, maybe we should call it original sin. Because it was.
I guarantee you that will be a meme. I just based on the people I see in the chat, they are meme makers, and that is a perfect one.
I mean, it was the perfect example of why you don't be a cuck. Look what happens.
Exactly.
If you let your woman run the show.
Oh my
and I know
God,
people hear this as an insult to women, and it's not. It's just a recognition of inherent differences.
Inherent differences, different roles. Exactly.
Back in my secular days, I used to follow a guy called Heartiste. He had this website about game and picking up chicks and politics and stuff. And he had this line that I'll never forget. He said, "Women hate beta males with a seething contempt that even a rapist cannot inspire." And it's true, man. I think it is. It's sad and it's dark, but you look at these serial killers in prison, they get love letters constantly, marriage proposals.
Right.
Beta males will never even get one.
Right.
Because that's the degree to which
women despise weakness.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why women have rape fantasies. I mean, and historically speaking, women, like if a group of Mongols or whoever are coming to your place, they're going to kill all the men. They may kill all the children. They may kill some women, but they're most likely going to sleep with all the women. And those women then are going to be adopted into the tribal setting. So women are naturally disposed to go with the strongest, go with the dominant group. That's why weakening men is such an insidious and pernicious activity that is done deliberately, because we are the only resistance to whatever the agenda is.
Yeah, there's something called the war bride effect, where basically if another enemy army conquers your town and they impregnate the women, within a year, the women are going to be in love with the fathers of their kids that just conquered and basically raped them. Right. Because, like you said, they have to align with the strongest men around. And sometimes strength expresses itself in violence, and that's really dark and unfortunate.
And that's why they have rape fantasies. And again, Charles Manson getting married in prison.
Yeah, they need to be protected. And if their men fail to protect them, they're going to say, well, these guys just killed my husband. I guess I'm going to go with them. They're clearly stronger. And this is not a nice thing to think about, but
Yeah,
at a certain level,
extremely
like
brutal.
the way women treat you, I think is a good reflection of your level of masculine strength in a certain way. Like if they spit on you and step on you and shove you around, like they're telling you something that you should be listening to, which is that you need to develop your inner strength a lot more.
Right.
If they treat you with respect and kindness, that's a good, indication. Because what I've discovered in my life is that you're not going to have a situation where if you're a guy, 90% of women you meet treat you like a doormat, and then there's one that's going to treat you like a king. Very, very rare. It's usually like an all or nothing, because all women have the same intrinsic feminine energy, and that tends to respond the same way to a man. So it's like either most women are going to disrespect you or most women are going to have respect for you to some degree or another. So
right.
I think women are a good mirror for you as a man in this way, of just showing you like where your current level is.
Right.
And hopefully inspiring you to increase that, not for them necessarily, but a nice side effect of increasing your level as a man will be increased respect from women.
Right. No, I think that is absolutely true. And the way, so obviously, okay. There's a few different ideas I was wanting to tie together with that. So what are things that, well, continuing with where you're at, what are things that a man can do to strengthen himself in the eyes of women? I think one of them, and something that you and I both promote, and I know Luke does, is physical fitness. That 100%. If you're not strong in life, in which we're all not strong, some people have iron wills, but maybe they're not physically strong. Well, that's still a sort of real strength. We can be strong in different ways, but if you're not strong anywhere, at least start with your physical self. And that's going to build the discipline. That's going to build the will. That's going to build determinism and perseverance that can be pushed into other avenues. But what would be your advice of somebody who may be listening right now? They love your content, and they feel like a hole just went right through their heart because you were talking about them, and they can't have positive relationships with women because and maybe deep down they have animosity towards women. Because they do feel like they're always stepping on them. They're always trying to dominate them. They're always trying to show them how weak they are as a man.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different things you can do. Obviously, physical fitness is very important. I mean, I've been really skinny. I've been really fat. I've been ripped. I've been not ripped. And it's never made a huge difference to women, oddly enough, because I kind of have always had that sort of willpower thing, but that's not what most people have. And like you said, building your physical fitness does build willpower, certainly, and discipline and determination. Teaches you to overcome challenges and adapt and be careful. Like there's a lot of really great lessons to learn from working out beyond just the growth of your muscles.
Right.
I think something men can do is impose duties and challenges on themselves that force them out of their comfort zone is really, really important. That's a good one.
That is a real good one.
Finishing things you start is incredibly important. The worst thing you can do as a man is start a project, give up, start a project, give up, start a project. And then you build this loop in yourself of why bother starting? I'm just not going to finish, which will crush your testosterone, crush your mind, crush your spirit. If you start something, you finish it.
Right.
Challenges that grow your comfort zone. I haven't thought about this as a Christian because I did it mostly as a secular person, like, approach 10 women at the mall and ask for a phone number to total strangers,
Right.
Which is really, really hard, especially if you're sober. It's really hard.
Right.
At first, anyway.
No, I read The Game.
Do things
right?
that scare you.
Yeah, and I was into that again way before Christianity, but in my early 20s. Yeah. Learning game, pickup artistry, approaching women, all that stuff. And that's the same thing with the streaming. It's like there's always a hurdle. You have to build that skill. You have to build that willpower again to always push through the resistance.
Yeah. I think anything that can help you build that sort of focused, pointed action. So let me get a little esoteric here, hopefully in a way that's not.
Well, that's the theme of today's conversation, so feel free.
Perfect. So if you look at old Hermetic paintings, for example, not everything that the Hermetists believed was wrong. And in fact, during Constantine's era, Lactantius thought a lot of Hermeticists were close to being Christian. He was trying to convert them because he thought they already believe in God, they already believe in virtue. But one of their symbols that they often used was the sun and the moon to represent men and women. And if you think about this difference, It makes a lot of sense because the man's job is to emanate, right?
Right.
And to penetrate and to be full of energy
Right.
that he's pushing out, right?
Right.
Pushing your energy out into the world. Whereas the light that the moon has is really just the reflected light of the sun. It doesn't have the light of its own. And it moves around the sun, right? And it goes through phases, right? Like women do with their cycles and everything. And so you have this penetrative and receptive principle between masculinity and femininity.
Right.
And men who have a receptive spirit is always going to rub women the wrong way because they're supposed to be the penetrative spirit.
Right.
And I think so that's the macro level, the sun and moon. On the really micro level, you could talk about the sperm and the egg because it's the same thing, right? The
Yep.
sperm is the one trying to penetrate and the egg is the one that receives.
Right.
So this goes through our personalities, through our energy of, I mean, nature is showing you how it's supposed to be,
Exactly.
right? Be the sperm, be the sun. Don't sit there trying to like take in influences from people and adapt yourself to them, except for God and the church fathers and the saints, of course. Mm-hmm. That's the one area where it's good to be receptive to male influence.
Yes, absolutely.
And stuff like that.
And it's real male role models. It's a real patriarchy. Yeah. It's a real hierarchy of competency too, right? Because another thing we're seeing is the inversion of hierarchical structures built in the name of incompetency, right? The transgender health administrator, whatever. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail, but continue.
No, I mean, that's a good point. Well, what you don't want to do, and what the submissive beta male type guys do, is by doing this worship of women feminism thing, what they're doing is they're forcing the woman to be the penetrative one. Mm-hmm. And women hate doing that. Like, sure, there's like that weird kinky stuff that some are into, but in general, women want to receive your masculine energy. They don't want to be the one emanating. And you can tell this because when they try to do it, when they try to act like men, it's a complete failure. Like they just act like jerks. Like, they're like, no, I'm just doing what men do. Like I'm being a boss. Like, no, if you were a guy, everyone would hate you for acting this way.
Right. You would get beat up. Like there would be physical violence to this.
For sure. So when they try to do that LARPing as a man, like they don't have that in their soul to do that. And of course there's a spectrum of masculine to feminine minded and, you know, testosterone is involved in this, of course. But you don't want to force the woman to act like a man just because if you're weak around her, that's what you're doing. You're creating a vacuum for her to step into, which she can't do. And she's not going to like it. And it's going to be uncomfortable. And she's not going to treat you well. And she's not going to be attracted to you.
Right.
You have to develop that sort of energetic pushing out, I would say.
And so another dimension on what you're talking about is like momentum in your life. That is a form of penetration, right? Your life has to be, a woman is not going to be receptive to you if she looks at your life and it's not moving.
Yeah.
It has to have momentum. It has to have velocity. Where are you going? And I was thinking about this. I was even thinking about making a video for members talking about, shared visions. Like if you're going to get with a woman, especially in a traditional structure, you got to have a vision. You have to be moving towards that vision. And then you have to find somebody who also wants to go along on the ride with that same vision.
Exactly. That's the most important thing. It's another quote from Hartis from 10 years ago that he was right about. You can't make your woman your mission. You have to have a mission that you're focused on. And like you just said, she'll respect that you have something you're trying to do, and if she's into you, she'll make herself your helper for that. But she doesn't want to be your center of the universe. Right? She might say she does, but she really doesn't.
Right.
That's a test. Like, make me the center of your world. She doesn't want to be the center of your world. She might want to be your companion.
Right.
And that's what you should want her to be, your companion, your helper, mother of your kids, whatever. But you have to have a center. You have to have a center of your world, like a mission, a thing that you're into, like becoming an expert at something, some skill that you have.
Exactly. Kip said it best. Girls like guys with skills.
That was a great impression. Dude, that's so weird you just brought that up. I was watching, for some reason, the YouTube algorithm was feeding me like Napoleon Dynamite clips today. So I was watching I've been talking to babes online all day. Don't be jealous, Napoleon. Like stuff like that. Feeding the llama.
Yeah, Tina.
Lex Kwando. Yeah, Tina the llama. Your impression was way better than mine.
Well, I appreciate it. I don't do Jay Dyer impressions very much, but that's one I do feel comfortable with. So I'll throw out a Kip once in a while.
Yeah. Girls like guys with skills. That's true. And if you
go ahead,
have talking can be a skill. Yeah. Like the way you communicate can be a skill. It doesn't necessarily have to be like you built a house or something,
Right. Yeah. And that is part of a man finding his identity, because I believe God gives us skills. In orthodoxy, I spoke about this previously. Orthodoxy has a theology that based on scripture. God may give one person 5 skills and one person 1 skill. None of those skills are the person's per se. Technically, they're God's. And you actually have a duty. This was the interesting thing that I never thought about until an Orthodox person told me this, is that your skill, because it's not you, your talent, you actually have a duty to work on that, to hone that, and to perform it for the world, not for yourself. It's not about how you feel that day, or if you truly have a skill and you believe that is a God-given skill, you have an obligation to hone it, perfect it, and perform it for the world.
Yes. No, you're totally right. And especially if what God has given you is something that no one else can do, you have to do it. Like, given my background with where I've come from, I don't have a choice. I don't feel like I have a choice. Like, I have to do this. God gave me my life story, my conversion story, brought me through Masonry and Judaism and all this. Like, this is what I'm here to do. I'm here to talk about this stuff and share this stuff with people. And there's no one else who has my same background.
Exactly.
There are people similar ones, but they might not have the skills of talking about it and articulating it. I have to do this. Right. This is my responsibility because this is what God stuck me with. Right. I might prefer to be on a beach in Jamaica being fanned with palm fronds, but that's not what God has set in store for me.
Right.
So I 100%.
Yeah. And that angle.
To go refill my water real quick.
Yeah. Feel free.
All right. I'll be back in a few.
Yeah. No problem. And that angle is what I was going to tell Michael. It's like, that is the value when he was talking about his own channel, or Dyer, or myself, or anybody, that there is this real value. There is a real value that's presented for other people, having acquired a unique vantage point, and then consuming orthodoxy, and then trying to express that unique vantage point through orthodoxy, through the lens of orthodoxy, looking at the world. And that's what Brother Augustine's doing. That's what most of us are trying to do. But related to another thing that I wanted to talk to him about, and he'll be familiar when he comes back, is again these esoteric trends in the occult, right? So we just talked about androgyny, Baphomet, the replete semiotics of the blending of male and female, right? Usually it's a entity with a male a penis, usually with female breasts, of which now we see in culture. But homosexuality, homoeroticism, again, Brother Augustine, I want him to speak to the prevalence of this within the occult. Aleister Crowley would be a perfect example. But also goddess veneration. And so we were just talking about this sort of pedalization, the idolization of the woman. And so within occult traditions, it's very common to venerate the goddess. So what I was doing now on some of these trends that we spoke about before the stream is I was trying to connect with what you were talking about with the pedalization, the idolization of the female, the man weakening himself due to his inability to be disciplined, to build boundaries, not engage in hedonism, that in the occult, goddess veneration is very prevalent. And we see then, I think the goddess veneration, the black female queen now, in society, this is a movement back towards tribal traditions are often goddess-centered, but the occult is always about the divine goddess. And I can't help but think, again, that's tied to just the way that culture is playing out in regards to these gender relationships.
Yeah. Boundaries is an important word, because a lot of the social engineering is meant to get rid of them and just blend everything into kind of one big undifferentiated blob, right? Like, just blend all the people together, all the races, all the genders, just blend everything into one big blob. That, I think, has the occult roots, like, of the Kabbalah. Like, there's the one undifferentiated Ein Sof, limitless light that they call it. And the point of the Kabbalah practitioners is to, like, go through those levels of differentiation and become part of that one thing again.
Right.
It's like they're forcing that on us on a physical level. Like, we're going to force you all to become one thing again against your will. It's for your own good.
Yeah.
And the deeper you get into the Kabbalistic theology, they're trying to, like, gather all the divine sparks over here, and they think they're going to bring their Messiah back by doing all this stuff. So there's always, like, a theological reason for this grotesqueness that we see playing out. Obviously, it's not going to work in the way they think it is.
Of course.
But if you read the scriptures, I mean, everything gets real bad.
Yeah, it's going to get worse before it gets better. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm hesitant to say we're in the end times just because every generation of Christians has said that for the last
Yeah.
2,000 years. I mean, it's worse than it's been in my life, but my life is not getting worse because of it necessarily, because I have the church and, God in my heart, and that keeps me sane. But I mean, imagine how miserable life must be right now for people without God.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing there for them. So I understand why suicides are going up and divorces and drug abuse. Like it sucks, but I get it. I mean, everything's been taken away from people, which is why you should go to church and become Christian, and then you'll have something that the world can't take away from you.
Right. In that void of God, like you said, the people who are stuck in lockdown, say they're in California or places that still have more strict regulations. Where's the source of meaning in their life? And so you see the satanic trap, the evil agenda is that again, those are all carrots, and they're being placed in front of you because that's all you have. And so you're gonna be quick to get your 2 vaccines and your Krispy Kreme donut. Because you're literally running back to the places where you used to find meaning, all of which are faux forms of meaning.
Yeah, and so people will do anything to get that little dopamine hit, like a sugary food or watch porn or do drugs. Like when everything's taken, like you just want to feel good again. And I think that's why people are running towards drugs and alcohol so much right now. They know it's not good for them, but they're like, I just want to feel something good or some kind of numbness, even just to not deal with the reality of what this country is turning into. And then when I was on Radix Virum's channel, half the chat was turning against me because they said I was like doing a psyop and being a disinfo show by talking about that things are about to get even worse. They're like, no, Q this, Trump that.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
This guy's a patriot. I was like, come on, guys, you're still on this train. have we learned nothing, children?
I know.
I just try to be realistic, and people do accuse me of being black-pilled sometimes, but I'm not black-pilled. Like, I'm one of the happiest people that I know in my own life, I think. Right. I'm always joking around and singing and having a good time. So me sharing what I see about where things are going, I'm not trying to depress you. I'm trying to say, stop worrying about trying to create a permanent situation out of a temporary world and go to where the eternity is, go to the Eucharist. That needs to be the source of your joy and stability in life. You cannot put your hopes for stability and happiness in changing things, in dying things.
Right.
I'm not saying anything different from what the Father said in that
right.
sense. But people are just upset that I'm complaining about the world, and I don't feel like I'm complaining. I'm just telling the truth,
Right. No, I'm totally with you, and it's the truth. It's just so sad to see how many people have no connection to God, real source of joy, real source of life. I feel very optimistic. It's interesting because, as you said, it's not like your life has gotten worse. I feel the same way. It's like, geez, okay, since March of 2020, I've got a lot of things done. I've been moving and grooving.
Right? Yeah.
Life has... Because the things that and what's interesting too is like so many things that they used to offer me that I would engage with, because of the politics that now cloaks those things. Give it basketball or football, or even just, that would be my getaway with sports. Oh, I'll just watch sports. I can't do it anymore. The commercials,
they took the distractions away.
Yeah, exactly. I can't even enjoy the distractions. So now it's like I just work all the time. I just read. I make streams.
Oh no, I can't go to the nightclub anymore. Well, good. If you're a Christian, you probably shouldn't have been doing it in the first place. Maybe you can see this as a chastising from God, perhaps as a breaking of the things that you weren't supposed to be spending your time on anyway.
Right.
It depends how you frame things in life.
Right.
This pandemic, okay, did it ruin your life, or did it take away your fake life so that you can go to church and start building a real one? It all depends on how you choose to look at situations like this.
Right. So the last topic I had for you, and then we can look at if there's any super chats real quick. And I'll let you go, was another trend that I feel is pretty prevalent within occultism, especially when you start looking at like Thelema, but really just start looking in the private lives of people who really go to the in degrees with this stuff, is homoeroticism and homosexuality. Even ways of form of enlightenment. So with Aleister Crowley, a man being sodomized, this is a way in which to open up a new energy vessel, right? And this empowers you and all this different stuff. Can you speak to your knowledge or awareness or understanding of homosexuality, homoeroticism present within the occult?
I never saw any of it, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Maybe I just avoided the worst of it. I was always more of like a solo practitioner anyway, so I wouldn't have been in situations like the OTO where I would see stuff like that. I mean, obviously in the polyamory world, it's kind of like anything goes for a lot of those people.
And the people that I knew in the Thaliba groups, the Thelemites, they were all into polyamory, and so
Yeah,
they
all
they
goes
were
together.
open about, you know, it didn't matter if it's male, female. It's
Yeah. See, even though I was a degenerate, I never got into that. I was like, well, why would I want that? You know, I don't need that energy vessel open.
yeah.
So I never saw it, but from what I'm told and from what I understand, like what you just said, it is a prevalent thing, and I think it's just another way for Satan to ruin your soul. Like this is the big point is like Satan's gonna ruin your soul however he can, like through whatever temptation is gonna work on you, whether that's being a greedy businessman or eating the like semen cake in the OTO rituals or the poop cakes or whatever it is that these people do. What Jay Dyer calls the pee-pee and the poo-poo ritual.
Yeah.
Like whatever it is that is interesting to you, Satan's going to try and organize that into your life somehow. He's going to try and orchestrate that for you, right?
Right.
It's the opposite of what God does, where he also, if you're following him, will orchestrate things for your salvation. Satan plays the opposite game. It's like a big chessboard. It's kind of how I see it between God and Satan, where they're both trying to like get you on the right side and set up situations that will move you in one direction or the other.
Right.
So I'm grateful that I avoided at least that form of degeneracy. I think I had my fill just with the drugs and hedonism.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my degeneracies, mostly just the psychedelics, because I never got into hardcore drugs. I wasn't a cocaine person, didn't get into heroin or crack or opioids, never was a pill person. I liked cannabis and I liked psychedelics, and then I engaged in a lot of sexual hedonism, that type of stuff. That was the main point of the life, right? You get high, then you go find the prettiest girl or whatever you do, and that's what you do. And so that consumed much of my 20s.
I woke up for a long time. That was like the only reason I got out of bed, was like find some pleasure to seek.
Right.
Or seek some pleasure to find.
Exactly. All right, brother. Well, I appreciate it. Let's check out some super chats real quick, if you have a few minutes.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Let me pull these up.
I need to move back to my other office in future live streams. I feel like a vampire, like sitting here in the dark in my room.
Dang it. My computer is slowing down real bad right now.
I can try and look on YouTube and see if I can find it.
Yes, could you? My YouTube is running real slow. It shows that we have 11.99, so I know there's some there.
Okay, let me see what I can find.
But my my computer is running on its limits right now. Okay, so it looks like we have. Oh, there it goes. It's now.
Yeah, I can't play the YouTube video without having another audio stream like interrupting this one, unfortunately. But I didn't see any super chats when I just kind of scrolled through.
I know we have some, so I'm just waiting for my internet to catch up. It's trying to bring up the Streamlabs. Gosh, it is so slow.
Maybe you need a faster computer. I mean, if
I know
OBS doesn't work for you.
Well, this is a MacBook Pro, newer one. I bought it in 2017, new. So you think it would be ideal, but
faster internet then maybe.
Well, I got 500 megabytes, so I'm pulling over. I'm pulling over like right now wirelessly, probably like over 200 upload download. But the processing power of the computer is like when I pull up Streamlabs and Zoom, and then start trying to do stuff, it's like it just cannot handle it all at the same time.
I never had that problem with my MacBook. That's odd.
Maybe I need to clean it. I don't know. Maybe it shows me that it doesn't have a whole lot of things running right now, but still.
Weird.
I don't know. Anyways, let me. So we got some super chats. Gosh, why are they not coming up over? We got one from Prism. Prism threw in $25. Thank you very much, brother. And he said, any advice for people with STEM background trying to do something genuinely good and useful without feeding into the degenerate, abusive, usurious parts of society? hard to find work that's not some way of scamming people? Well, I would say there's so much you could do with STEM. Anything that is, like engineering is a very useful field to get into. I would say all the STEM field. If my child, the only reason they would go to university is if they wanted to do STEM or they wanted a professional degree. Outside of that, I'm going to push, again, real skills.
Yeah.
So if you're getting into STEM, I think you really can't go too wrong because those are real skills that are applicable to many different fields. What are your thoughts generally, Michael?
Well, I have no background in STEM. You could invent something, look at the world and see how you could use your skills to make some process faster or easier or cheaper. That's what inventions are. You take something and make it better most of the time, instead of coming up with something completely brand new. I guess it would depend on exactly what type of STEM you're into. Like if you're into higher math, frankly, I have no idea what to do with that. I'm still working on, basic multiplication tables over here. I don't know. I mean, building bridges, building buildings. I mean, civil engineering is like part of the infrastructure of society. I don't see that as intrinsically evil. I mean, people need buildings. Right. People need roads. I think there's plenty that you could do with that.
Right. Just think of ancient crafts. Every civilization needs people to do certain things.
Yeah.
And so I think getting into any of those is useful.
Yeah. I mean, maybe don't join the military or like a company that like Raytheon or something if you don't want to use it to aid the war machine, which some people do because that's just where their skills happen to lie. Yeah. So sorry, I wish I could give a better answer on that one.
Yeah, I don't have anything in particular. Like, again, it's based on your own interests. Like if we tell you, what you should really do? You should really, really go into computer engineering. And I mean, if that's not your passion, but if your passion is something in STEM, find out what that is. And I think all of that's going to be applicable. And plus you can use that even within a Christian context. Like if you're an engineer, if you're an architect, if that stuff can be translated to projects useful to the general community that we're talking about and trying to belong to. So
yeah, you can design and build churches, for example.
There's so much you could do.
Field.
So I'm all for going to school for STEM or professional degrees. Outside that, stay away.
Yeah.
So on YouTube, looks like we got super chat from Joshua Smith threw in $4.99 and said, "Love me some Witcoff." And then the Concerned Westerner threw in $2 and said, "Looking into ortho. Thanks, guys." And then we got one from William Wallace. He said, "Awesome stream." And David asked if I can recommend basically an Orthodox church in the Bay Area. I would say in the Bay Area. Unfortunately, I used to go to Holy Virgin, the very famous church that has the body of St. John of Shanghai. That church, unfortunately, my buddy Nick, who spends time in the Bay Area, he let me know that they actually aren't letting any new people attend liturgy there. So you have to be a member of Holy Virgin, again, one of the most beautiful churches in the country, housing the body of John of Shanghai. And if you're not a regular parish member, you can't attend. So that's a little disheartening. I also went to an OCA church in Berkeley, California. Not that I'm recommending it to you. I had a friend, I think he went to Holy Trinity, which is in San Francisco. It's in the city. He had a great experience there. This is my buddy Nick, and he said many quote-unquote ortho bros go there, people that, again, belong to this online community. So maybe look for Holy Trinity. I never attended there, so I can't tell you from first personal experience that this is a great place, do this or that. But that might be an option. I can't really recommend anything because I would go to Holy Virgin because it was the most beautiful church, and so I would go there and listen to their whole Slavonic liturgy. But you can't go, and really the fact that they're not letting outsiders into the church, I mean, that's sad. It's almost you don't want to go at that point. You're like, what the heck? Are you serious?
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Yeah, that would be all that I have to say about that. I wish I could give you a better option regarding churches in the Bay Area. I'm just not sure. And plus, meet with people, find maybe a spiritual father that you prefer, that might help. So I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you, brother, but thank you very much for the support. Simon the Amputee threw in $10 and said, a legendary stream from my two favorite jacked ortho bros. Here's a token of my appreciation, gentlemen. Well, thank you very, very much, Simon the Amputee. Pleasure and humbled to be considered a voice of interest for yourself. So thank you very, very much. Let me check one more time on Streamlabs. I know that we got some, but they weren't coming up in regards to some super chats. Then I'll let you go. Thanks again, brother, for coming on. I feel like it was a great conversation. We hit on a lot of different topics.
Yeah, I agree.
Also, guys, Witcoff's books are in the video description. If you'd like to read his book on poetry, it's Theopoetica. Am I correct?
Theopoetica, yeah.
And so
I kind of made the word up, I think, so I don't know if it has a proper pronunciation. And I got this guy too. Oh.
Looks like Pano also threw in $3, and he said, thoughts on the Orthodox prophecies of the Marble King. They saw the 3-day-long World War III will bring about the awakening of the sleeper saint in Hagia Sophia, who will spread orthodoxy across the world. I see this as God baptizing the looming, quote, Great Reset idea. I'm not too familiar with that at all. That's all new news to me, Pano. Michael, are you familiar with that?
No, I don't have the level of piety and wisdom required to comment on a prophecy, so I'm just going to engage in holy silence and bite my tongue.
Well, if you don't, then I don't either. That's for damn sure. So I'm going to do the same. But Pano, thanks for the $3, and I'll read it again real quick. He said, thoughts on Orthodox prophecies of the Marble King, of which neither one of us are familiar with. They say the 3-day-long World War III will bring about the awakening of the sleeper saint in Hagia Sophia, who will spread orthodoxy across the world. I see this as God baptizing the looming, quote, Great Reset idea. Well, I sure as hell hope so, but I don't. I'm not familiar with that. If you can privately send me some stuff, Pano, I'd definitely be interested in looking into that.
I just Googled Marble King. All I found was some marble company in West Virginia, so... Oh, I got on it.
Liam Converse threw in $1.99 for a thumbs up. Thank you very much, Liam. And I think I heard one more Streamlabs go off, then we can hop off here. And everybody go check out Luke's stream. I think Luke should be live right now. I'm sure he's got his intro music playing.
And he'll be on my show tomorrow at 5 p.m. I'm going to have Luke Kendrat from Orthodoxy First over on the Brother Augustine channel.
Yeah, that would be a great combo. I was going to have another good Orthodox brother, James, how do you pronounce his name? Cortides, I believe is how you pronounce it. Great guy. And we scheduled a stream for tomorrow, and I got to reach out to him. Totally forgot about pre-sanctified liturgy on Wednesday night. And we scheduled the stream 30 or an hour right before liturgy starts. So I either got to miss pre-sanctified liturgy or see if we can reschedule. I totally spaced that.
Yeah, I think I'm doing a chat with him Saturday. I have to check my emails. But
dang. Well, we got the same agents, or what's going on here?
It sounds like it, man.
But James is a great guy. I was just on his Rooster Crow podcast. Yeah, he's and he was also into psychedelics like we were. It's amazing how many people in the Orthodox community had previous experiences with the psychedelic stuff.
Yeah. It's part of the truth seeker personality, I think.
Right. Well, I don't see any more super chats, so brother, I will let you go. Thank you so much for coming on. I truly do appreciate it. And
of course, my pleasure, man.
Yeah, we definitely should do it again soon. And I'm looking forward to meeting you actually in person and having some firm handshakes sometime in June.
And hopefully not in a gulag. Hopefully we'll be allowed to travel out there and do the forum.
Yeah. Yeah,
I see
brother.
he's
So, guys,
Jackson.
Michael Cisco will be on Friday again to promote the trad forum. We'll talk more in detail and specifics about it. But again, if you want to meet Michael Witcoff or E. Michael Jones or Michael Cisco or Luke Kindrat or myself, it'd be great. You'd be supporting us, all of our works, by purchasing a ticket, hitting up Michael Cisco, and joining us in person in Indiana to talk about traditional Christian values. So it should be a real fun time. But is there anything else you'd like to say, brother, before hopping off here?
No, just thank you for having me on, and thank you everybody who's participating and sending super chats. Thank you for giving us a couple hours of your time. I hope that you have learned something and been entertained and educated and edified. And yeah, thank you for your time, everybody.
Agreed. Thank you all so very much. And as always, until next time.